Merlin, network magic. Hey everybody, John Capobianco here, and this is probably one of the most important videos I'm going to make because it clearly shows the difference between the CLI automation, the REST API, and REST API automation. So, the CLI versus the API. Now, a couple of things here. There's terms that you should be familiar with. When I talk about idempotency is the idea that my offline intended config, something I'm generating from a data model and a template, matches the running config, the state of the network. So when I run something like a Merlin job, I could run it 1,000,000 times and nothing will ever change because it's idempotent. Now, can we achieve idempotency through the CLI, through the command line interface? Well, let's take a look at network automation through the command line interface. So we're going to use VLANs, right? So I can just show VLAN, and we can see that it has these predefined VLANs on this Nexus 9K in the sandbox. And of course, I could say conft VLAN 10 name, right, Lancelot. And now if I do a show VLAN, there's VLAN 10. All right, now to remove that, I have to say, I have to say no VLAN 10. Now, how do we automate this? Well, I'm doing it through Python. You can do it through Ansible and a variety of other tools. But Merlin, particularly Lancelot, is a PyATS job that does several things. So again, when I talk about the data model, this is the data model with all of the parent keys collapsed. And as you can see, I data model the global config, VDCs, users, VLANs, VRFs, SVIs, port channels, interfaces, loopback, OSPF, BGP, you name it. We data model it. So this is what the VLANs look like. We have VLAN 1 with a name of no name, it's false, and then the base VLANs. Now, how do I push or generate an iOS config from this? Well, if I go to my templates and find the show or SSH intended VLANs, well, here's the logic in the right side for the Jinja template that says for VLAN in host data model host VLANs here, well, VLAN and then the VLAN number. If name, meaning if it's not false, then say name after 2 spaces and then put the name in. So now I have some output folders here. Let me make sure that they're empty. I'm not sure that they are. They're not empty. Let me flush these out. So now what I like to do is 3 different output files, 4 technically. So what I want is to capture the intended config, the compilation between the data model and the template and what it looks like in iOS, in this case NXOS config, in this folder. I want the pre-change state and the post-change state as original and as golden image files. And I want any changes that are captured. Now, right now, if I run this Lancelot for SSH, there won't be any changes at all because I haven't changed the data model. Now, I'll get into the Python once I've run the code. I'll do a side-by-side at the end, but for now, let's just run it and let's time it. So like I said, we're going to time the command to see how long this takes. Now, this is the CLI Lancelot that's going to take the intended config from YAML with the Jinja 2 and render an NXOS syntax config, log into the device, and then serially push the config line by line. So that's what it's doing right now. If you look closely, we're in config mode, config VDC mode, config radius, right? This is very cool. And I'm not trying to diminish this in any way, but you'll see there are some drawbacks and some gotchas to this approach. So we'll let this finish, and then at the very end it will give us an idempotency check, and the two nights should be green that they match. And then I'm going to add a VLAN through the CLI, show you how that works, and then we'll show you how this starts to break down. Okay, so again, idempotency check, everything matches and matches. Intent matches running. And if we look in the output files here, we can see that there are no changes, right? Idempotent, no changes. And this is what our intended config looks like. And there's the VLAN section. Okay, follow so far? So let's affect change. Let's add a VLAN. And things are going to be just fine so far by adding a VLAN. This is not a problem with SSH-based automation. But I'll show you where the problem comes in. Right? Lancelot SSH. Save that. Rerun the job. And that's all I have to do. You go, what? That's all you have to do to add a VLAN is just add it to the data model? Yes. That's automation. That's infrastructure as code. We have a template that will just template out as many VLANs as we need. And here in a second, you'll see right there, VLAN 10, Lancelot SSH. Right here. So it got pushed through the CLI automation. Wonderful, right? No complaints so far. Now here's where things get a little tricky and a little bit challenging. And I'm going to show you two different instances of what could happen. One being more common than the other. And right, we can see, warning, there are changes. Red does not match green. And we've added +10 Lancelot VLAN. All right, let's remove it. Right? Can I just do this and delete it from the data model and save it and run it? Well, unfortunately, no. Remember, CLI is serially executing the commands. That's all that it's doing. So when I remove VLAN 10 from my intent, there's nothing in my template that says no VLAN 10. As you can see here, it will just, right? It just does not push VLAN 10. But that's different than removing VLAN 10, right? We either need a follow-up automation step or we need to manually log into the CLI and remove the VLAN. Now let me show you the other, and I'll show you here. Now this is going to say I'm idempotent and intent matches config. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Right? If I go into my artifacts, we will see that it thinks it's idempotent. But if we look at the intended config, right, this one has VLAN 10. This one does not have VLAN 10. But if we look at the golden image, right, this is our golden image and it still has VLAN 10. Not good, not good. Now the other place where you could get into trouble is if someone does this. Whoops, I wasn't in config T mode. VLAN 20 name CLI added. Well, CLI added, if I do show VLAN, is obviously here on the device, but it's not in my intent, and it will never be picked up by my intent. So let me just flush those out. And so that's it for the CLI automation. Pretty good. Obviously miles ahead of logging in and doing it manually, but not without some pretty significant gotchas. Enter the NX API. Now, when I started with automation, there were certain platforms, 6500s, 3750s, right, iOS. There is never going to be a RESTful API. But if you're buying modern or next-gen equipment, 3850s, 9300s in the Catalyst line, anything that's Nexus, They come with RESTful APIs that let us truly program against the platform. So I'm going to switch over to a different tool real quick called Postman. And Postman is an API browser, an API development tool, an API development kit. And what I have here is a collection called Nexus 9K. And in this collection, I have different requests. First, with NXOS, I need to do a post with my username and password that has permission to go get a token. So I send this as a post to the IP address /API AAA login.json with this body in JSON, and I get back my token. So now I'm going to take this new token and refresh it against other requests. So let's start with just VLANs. Now they're called bridge domains, right? And I just have to refresh my token here. And we're going to go against this long string, which is at the bd bridge domain.json, excuse me. Send it. Well, this is the equivalent API version, the managed objects in the management information tree. And we can see that they are, right, there's a total count, IM data, bridge domain entity, the attributes, the distinguished name is system/bridge domain. And then it has children, layer 2 bridge domain, 101 prod is the name. Pretty cool. Now, even just here in Postman, let me do another one. We can go get the full config. The full configuration. And it comes back, and you can see it's pretty big comparatively. And it's just pages and pages and pages. It's the full state of the Nexus 9K as JavaScript object notation. The full state of the network. So now let's just do a change. So here is my body. And I have VLAN 101, 100, 102, 104, 1, 103, 105. Let's do the same thing and copy one. And we're going to make it VLAN 10. Right? Lancelot NX API. And again, here is the CLI to show that I'm not cheating in any way. Show VLAN. Right? It has the base VLANs. We send this. We got a 200 status OK. And now if I do show VLAN at the CLI, there is VLAN 10, Lancelot NX API. And if I do my get here, VLAN 10, Lancelot NX API. Very cool. Now, can I just remove it from the post to get rid of it? Right, so let's just get rid of what we just added here to the put, and then put it again, and then do our show VLAN again. Hey, it's gone. It is gone. Declarative configuration. This is my intent. Push it. It is now running the intent. There's no login and know this out or write a second automation step to remove and clean up after yourself. Pretty powerful. Now let's do it in Python. No problem. Well, I'm using the same data model. And we're going to run it 3 times. We're going to run it once to prove it's idempotent. We're going to make a change. We're going to make another change. And then we're going to run it a 4th time. So the only difference here is that I am pulling from a different template. And I'll show you the template for the API. Right? And I'll put them side by side. Let me split the screen one more time. And I'll put the SSH in the middle. Right, so from this data model on the left, this list of VLANs, host VLANs, this is the format to create NXOS CLI stanzas. And this is the syntax to make NX API config stanzas. Now you'll notice that this is all hard-coded, and then I do my for loop, and then I have my logic to say if VLAN, right, if name, etc., which gives me the valid JSON, which then I can post to the API. So far, so good. Let's go ahead and run it Pythonically. Okay, so let's get ahead and run this in Python. Now remember, we haven't added anything. We have our base VLANs, and we're expecting an idempotent config here. So let's go ahead and run the, whoops, I lost the command. Let's go ahead and run the command. And I don't want Postman, I want Ubuntu. And here we go. Now this is obviously going to be faster because it's not serially executing line by line. It's just pushing a declarative right here. There's the response 200. We've already pushed the intent. Now, is it idempotent? Yes, it is. It is idempotent. Now let's take a look at what we've generated. So if we go into our Lancelot folder, we're going to see, so here is the intended config as SSH, right? Looks like a standard CLI config. Now here is the intended config as JSON, right? Which matches the Postman that we have here. Looks good, right? Very cool. And then our golden image, again, it is the full thing, all of this JSON. And it's too much even for VS Code to preview it. There's so much config there. But we have it. Now let's go ahead and affect that change. So we'll go find our data model, and we're going to add VLAN 10, name, right? Lancelot NX API this time. Save this, rerun it, and let's put time on here, just to give us a sense of how long this takes over my, very close to dial-up 5 megabit DSL. And it's right now it has pushed those VLANs. And let's see, what do we get for a diff? It is different. Look. So, right, warning, there are changes. And there's our plus VLAN 10. And if we check the CLI, show VLAN, there's VLAN 10. Now, the real power. Can I just remove this from my intent, save it, and rerun it? Now, I'm expecting another differential here that's not idempotent, and it should see the removal of VLAN 10. So we have our response 200. I might even have a pause in there that I'll look at that's added to the time. So in 1.5 seconds of CPU, right? And we see there's the diff. And we should see a minus 10. Well, now let's check. Gone. Fully declarative idempotent configuration management. Now, if I run this one more time, it will be idempotent because the VLAN 10 has not been added or removed. Incredible. Incredible. This is why we moved to the API for automation, to use Postman, to use curl, to use Python, to program the fabric. Would you even consider the SSH line by line? Yes, I know it's configuring the device, but it's not really programming it. Here, I'm saying take this set of JSON, merge it into memory, and now you've been programmed to have that set of VLANs. Really cool stuff. So what's next for me? Well, I've done VLANs. I'm going to see about users and VDCs and VRFs and all of these other constructs. I need the JSON Jinja 2 templates now. So, thank you. And again, to wrap it all up, we have the CLI standard manual. Log into the command line interface and type in your configs or your show commands. We have CLI automation, either with Python, Genie, PyATS, learn, parse, configure, or through something like Ansible, iOS config module, NXOS config module at the command line. Imperative, not declarative. Real problems when you want to remove things from your intent, or if somebody logs into the CLI and does something manually. Now we have the REST API. We looked at NX API today. You can use Postman, you can use curl, you can use Python, you can use the Ansible URI module to create an intended config from a data model and template, with the advantage of being able to remove things from intent and declaratively push an idempotent configuration. Thanks for tuning in. I'm here for questions. I'm here to help. Clone the repo, star the repo, reach out to me on Twitter, and let's automate the world together with Merlin Network Magic. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.